February is the worst month. Seriously. This is always the case unless you are lucky enough to live in a place where there is almost no winter. Every February is terrible, but this particular February surpassed all others in its squalor. I thought about that as I sat on my condo balcony, sipping coffee and smoking a cigarette. Yeah, I know it's a bad habit, one I kicked years ago when money was tight. But money isn't an issue anymore, and frankly, I just don't care much these days. I never smoke around the kids, though. I don't want them picking up my bad habits or being exposed to secondhand smoke. But they're with their grandparents this weekend, so I have a bit of alone time to sit and reflect. The worst February in the history of humanity started with 2 weeks where the sun never showed up. Gray skies, temperatures stuck in the 20s, and just enough snow to keep things miserable. Everyone was counting down to Valentine's Day like it was their lifeline. It fell on a Thursday that year, and so many people planned to take the Friday off that editorial columns joked about shutting down the whole city on the 15th. My wife Linda and I had big Valentine's Day plans, like everyone else. But we woke up to 2 more inches of snow, with more coming down fast. By mid-afternoon, both of us got sent home early before the city completely shut down. When we should have been getting dressed for a night out, the roads were closed to all non-essential traffic, so we swapped our fancy clothes for comfy sweats. The epic Valentine's Day date, dinner, a movie, and dancing that was meant to make up for the dreariness of the last 2 weeks turned into frozen pizza and watching Frozen with the kids. The only dancing we did that night was carrying Emma and Timmy, ages 6 and 4, up to bed amidst their protests of, "You know there won't be school tomorrow." After the kids were asleep, I handed Linda a glass of wine, letting out a sigh as I did. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I said. "This isn't how things were supposed to go." "It's okay, Jim. It's not your fault. I enjoyed looking forward to what you had planned for us. Plus, if nothing else, I got a new party dress out of it," she replied. "Which I haven't seen yet," I pointed out. "You know the rule. You won't see it until you take me out in it," she said, with a playful raise of her eyebrows. I tried to picture what she had bought and how she'd look in it. Everything she wears not only looks fantastic, but also reflects her personality. She started making her own clothes back in middle school, and still does from time to time. She also makes many of Emma's dress-up outfits. Anyone who saw her dressed up would think she was the most attractive woman in the room, though there might be others who looked flashier. I glanced at the diamond ring I had put on her finger nearly 10 years ago, its sparkle catching the firelight. "Thank you for saying yes, Linda. I love you." I raised my glass. "To us." "I love you too." "To us," she said with a smile. We sat quietly for a moment, content in the silence. "Linda, I'm sorry I've been such a bear these last few days," I admitted. "It's not because of anything you or the kids did. You deserve better from me. It's just this damn February and this—" "I know, Jim," she said softly. "I'm sorry too. I've been just as bad. I think hibernating bears have the right idea. We should be sleeping until spring. Everyone's been on edge, even the kids. The people at my work are much worse than you, though. How's work for you?" "Same." "Well, look at it this way, Jim. We've got each other, the kids, our home, and we know where our next meal's coming from." "Yeah, Wendy's," I joked, thinking of our first date so long ago. It had become an inside joke between us. I had met her in college when my parents had to stop supporting me to cover my dad's medical bills. I refused to take a loan, so after tuition and books, I had no money left. Linda was in a slightly better situation and had offered to pay or split the bill, But I wouldn't allow that, so I saved up to take her somewhere nice. She told me I was being silly, and said the point was to spend time together and get to know each other, which we could easily do at Wendy's. So that's where we went, and the rest is history. We've moved up in the world since, but every now and then, we still get Wendy's for old time's sake. Seriously, though, I said, how do people get through times like this if they don't have love? Sometimes they don't. Linda shuddered, recalling a high school boyfriend of hers who had taken his life with booze and pills on Valentine's Day a few years back. Well, we have it, and we'll make it through, I said. I put down my glass and took both her hands in mine. Happy Valentine's Day, my beloved wife. Happy Valentine's Day, my beloved husband. We locked eyes for a moment before deciding to move things to the bedroom. We ended up getting the long weekend the editorial writers had hoped for, thanks to nearly 2 feet of snow instead of the predicted 8 inches. Everything was shut down, but thankfully very few people lost power. And, for those who really needed to get somewhere, enough people had snowmobiles to manage. Our kids, naturally, were thrilled. Both Mom and Dad were home all day. There was plenty of snow to play in, pizza to eat, and movies to watch. Not to mention no school. What more could they ask for? Linda and I were quite happy too. There was no rush to be anywhere or do anything, so we could just enjoy our family time to the fullest. We weren't worried about food. Since both of us grew up around here, we always made sure to stock up well in advance, with extra to share if needed. Emma and Timmy wore themselves out so much that they went to bed without any complaints and slept soundly through the night. That, of course, gave Linda and me a chance to enjoy some time together in ways we usually had to wait for the kids to leave the house. There were only a couple of downsides that weekend, in my opinion. We had hundreds of movies at home, but the kids only wanted to watch one, Frozen, over and over again. Sure, it's a cute story with good music, but come on. And Linda still wouldn't model the dress for me or even let me see it. Taking me out in it means out, not in, she said with a playful smile. What if I promised to take you out of it? Does that count? I asked. Nice try, but no deal, she replied, standing her ground. The reality of life returned to us early Sunday evening when snowplows drove through our neighborhood. School and work classes were scheduled for Monday, and we all sighed and began to prepare. Shortly before bedtime, Emma and Timmy, freshly washed and dressed in pajamas, went into the living room. As usual, the older sister Emma acted as a speaker, standing as straight and tall as possible. Mommy, Daddy, this weekend was the best of my life. Thank you for playing with us, watching our movie, and spending all 3 days together. We love you. With these words, our daughter climbed onto my lap, and my son climbed onto Linda's. After the tenderest hug imaginable, they switched parents and hugged us again. I looked at Linda, and there were tears in her eyes, just like mine. We love you too, I managed to say. We are so lucky that you are our children. That night, Linda and I made love. The next morning, none of us could stop smiling. Not Linda, not me, not the kids. But soon the cold, dreary February returned, and the magical long weekend became just another memory. Linda and I had just collapsed on the sofa in the living room, exhausted, after finally putting Emma and Timmy to bed, when her phone rang. I muttered something under my breath, although I don't remember exactly what it was. It's Dee, I have to answer, she said. We had a friendly group of 5 couples with whom we talked from time to time. We all met after the wedding, so there were no awkward when-you-were-single moments. We all shared the same view of loyalty. It was non-negotiable. At least, that's what I thought at the time. That way, when we went out, we could dance with each other's spouses if we wanted a bit of variety, knowing it was all in good fun and safe. We were especially close to Dee and her husband, Dave. Dee and Linda were practically best friends forever. Linda gave a "I'll keep this short" gesture as she answered the phone. I watched Linda grow more excited as she talked to Dee. By the time the call ended and she plopped onto my lap, she was practically glowing. "So, what was that about?" I asked, my smile mirroring hers. "Well, my dear husband," she said with a playful smirk, "I know you've had more than enough of this awful February." "You got that right," I replied, reaching for my glass of wine. But Linda stopped me, grabbing my wrist and placing my hand firmly on her slim waist. "So we've been complaining about how this has to be the worst February ever, and to make it worse, we've got an extra day to deal with," she explained. Her smile didn't quite match the complaint, and I pointed that out. "That's because Dee had the most amazing idea," Linda said. "The extra day is on a Friday. So what if we all got babysitters for the kids, had a fancy dinner, went dancing at a great club, and then got hotel rooms for the night? That way we could really let loose, not worry about driving home, and end this dreadful month on a high note." I liked the idea but had a few questions. "How are we getting back to the hotel from the club? Wouldn't we need to drive?" I asked. "You can call me cautious, but I'm usually the one who thinks about what could possibly go wrong with a plan." "That's the best part, Jim," she said, sounding excited. "You know the Madison Uptown? We've eaten there, remember? There's a dance club a block away that some of Dave's coworkers go to. They've got a live band playing on Friday, and there's no cover charge if you have dinner at the Madison. Oh, and Phil and Jane have already arranged for Mrs. Porter to watch their kids overnight, and she's fine with watching ours too." I need to think about this," I said, pretending to be thoughtful. I didn't really need to, but I knew that if I acted like there was a concern, she'd find a way to persuade me. Instead, she grabbed a couch pillow and hit me over the head with it. "Ow! All right, I've thought it over. Let's do it. But there's one condition," I told her. "What's that?" Linda asked, eyeing me suspiciously. I took her sweet face in my hands and looked into her blue eyes. "You wear the dress you bought for Valentine's Day that I still haven't seen," I said. "As you wish, my lord," she said with a grin. "Your wish is my command." The dress was blue. Don't ask me what kind of blue, because I couldn't tell you. All I know is that it made her blue eyes seem like they could glow in the dark. It had long sleeves, a high neck, and the skirt went below her knees, but it was far from a granny dress. The hem of her skirt flared out slightly, rippling just enough with each step to catch the eye. When she danced, it would playfully move on its own. The smooth fabric invited the touch, as it both revealed and hinted at the curves beneath. Linda smiled as she slowly descended the stairs toward me, leaving me speechless and staring. "Dear Jim," she whispered softly, closing my mouth with a gentle touch under my chin. I swallowed hard, still unable to find my voice. "It's still me, the same me as always. You don't need to flatter me, though I do love it when you do," she said. "You don't get it. You have no idea how stunning you look. You ... The words caught in my throat. I took her delicate hands in mine, bowed my head, and kissed them. When I looked up, her eyes were glistening and her smile trembled just slightly. She understood without needing more words. The 10 of us met at the restaurant. It was busy on that Friday night, but we had a big enough table for everyone. We laughed, talked, and savored the meal, enjoying each other's company and the fact that February was finally coming to an end. Linda was easily the most stunning woman in the room, and I must have told her that at least half a dozen times. I found every possible excuse to touch her arm, shoulder, or hand. She returned the gesture, smiling deeply into my eyes. It was clear. This was going to be a night to remember. We checked into our rooms before heading over to the club. Neither Linda nor I are great with alcohol, so I usually took on the role of designated driver. Tonight, though, I was relieved that I wouldn't need to do that. Not that I ever minded. Keeping my friends safe was important to me. But I was looking forward to having Linda all to myself as soon as possible. It seemed like she had the same plan. She excused herself to go to our room alone for a bit, flashing that playful, "I'm going to get you later" smile when she returned. "We don't have to stay at the club for too long, right?" she whispered as we walked. Knowing how much Linda loved dancing with our friends, it was clear what she really meant. "I hope we don't have to wait too long before we're alone together, preferably NACD. I gave her a knowing grin in return. "It's your call, babe," I replied. She playfully tapped my upper arm before latching onto it. We had reserved a table for 10 at the club, and it was a good thing we did. It looked like a lot of people were out trying to forget February, but they still managed to notice the 5 women in our group. "You're turning heads, babe," I whispered. "As usual, you're the most gorgeous woman here." "Oh, stop," she replied, pressing herself lightly against me. "You know flattery will get you everywhere." Neither of us are amazing dancers, but we don't embarrass ourselves either. We're more focused on enjoying each other's company than putting on a show for everyone else. So I danced with the love of my life, pausing occasionally for some hot wings and a drink. I went to grab more wings, and when I came back, I saw Dave asking Linda for a dance. I caught her response. "I'd love to, Dave, and I'd do it some other time, but tonight I want to make it special for Jim and me. I'm only dancing with him tonight," she said. Was I proud? Happy? You bet I was. I handed out the wings and whispered in Linda's ear. "So, is it time to leave yet?" I asked. "Right after you bring a fresh plate of wings? What are you thinking? We're going to need our energy for what I have planned," I said, raising an eyebrow. She gave me that look again and held my hand under the table. A few minutes later, the band took a break. In the relative quiet, we could hear loud laughter coming from another table, so we turned to look. "Hey, isn't that Mark Lavaliere?" Phil asked, stretching his neck to see around me. It is," Dee squealed with excitement. Mark Lavaliere was the star tight end of the Sharks, our city's pro football team. Unlike many others, he made his home here year-round. He had a reputation for being a genuinely good guy, known as much for his community involvement as for his on-field achievements. He quickly became the center of conversation at our table. The guys talked about his football skills while the women praised his good deeds and charming personality. "And it doesn't hurt that he's good-looking either," Dee added. Linda and I both knew who he was, but we weren't all that interested in anything except each other at that moment. We let the conversation flow around us, holding hands under the table. "Hey, you two, get a room," Dee teased. Linda and I exchanged glances. We hadn't even been kissing. Well, not really kissing. Feeding her wings didn't count. Besides, we already had a room. We were spared any further embarrassment when the band started up again. "Should we dance here or go upstairs?" I whispered to Linda. Before she could answer, Jane cut in. "Look, he's coming over," she exclaimed. Sure enough, Lavaliere had left his table and was walking toward ours. I couldn't help but chuckle at how the women at our table reacted. 4 of them started primping and straightening up, practically screaming, "Pick me, pick me!" It was an embarrassing display. If you think a woman can't strut while sitting down, think again. Linda looked down and squeezed my hand a little tighter. "Hi, I'm Mark. Care for a dance?" he asked, standing behind Linda's left shoulder, extending his hand to her. I felt her pull away from my hand abruptly, like it had burned her. I stood there, stunned, as she turned her back on me without a word, extended her right hand to Mark, and elegantly rose from her seat without even a second glance my way. Her hand looked tiny in his massive grip, and the blissful expression on her face was impossible to miss. In that instant, I no longer existed in her world. "Hey man, now my feelings are hurt. I thought she was only dancing with you tonight," Dave teased. "Yeah, that's what I thought too," I muttered. "Come on, Jim, it's just a dance," Jane said, trying to reassure me. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake the bad feelings settling in. The band played a few fast songs, and our entire table watched them dance. So did everyone else in the room. Mark was impressive, much better than I could ever be, and Linda was clearly having a great time. Together they highlighted each other perfectly. Her dress and his moves were an ideal match. "Don't they look amazing together?" "Come on, Jim, let's join them," Dee suggested, trying to distract me. "No thanks," I responded abruptly. The next song was a slow one. I watched as Linda melted into his arms, fitting perfectly, as if that was where she belonged. He was skilled at this too, no doubt. Plenty of practice, I assumed. Mark whispered something to Linda, and she smiled warmly in response. He wasn't doing anything inappropriate, nothing I could legitimately object to. He kept the same respectful distance that I had when I danced with Dee or Jane. His hands stayed exactly where they were supposed to. Another slow song, a ballad this time. I could see the band leader timing the mood by watching my wife and her new partner. Mark smiled, clearly pleased with the connection they shared as he held her in his arms. I'd seen enough, and was determined to stop it. I stood from my chair, but Jane gently placed her hand on my arm. "Wait, Jim. Let her have this. Don't ruin it for her," she urged. I shook her hand off and looked over at Linda's face. It was clear she wanted to be right where she was, and nowhere else. She didn't want me to interfere. In fact, I wasn't even in her thoughts. It was painfully obvious. Defeated, I slumped back into my chair, heartbroken. The song finally ended, and Mark gave a nod to the band leader, who started playing a faster tune. Mark and Linda walked off the dance floor, smiling at each other but not touching, not even holding hands. She gave him one last radiant smile as she turned toward our table, while Mark headed in the opposite direction. The difference between a woman's best smile and her second best is subtle. Unless you know her well, you probably wouldn't notice it. As Linda approached our table and our eyes met, her best smile shifted to her second best. At that moment, I knew something was wrong. "I keep telling you, you're the most beautiful woman here," I whispered in her ear as I seated her. I reached for her hand, holding it between both of mine. "Shall we take the next dance back to our room?" For the briefest moment, I could have sworn Linda was scared. Her eyes widened, and I felt her hand tremble. She quickly recovered, looking away across the table. "I'm sorry, everyone. I just need to go to the restroom. Linda, would you join me?" Dee asked loudly, her voice carrying across the room. I was too distracted to question why she felt the need to announce it to everyone. Linda gave me an apologetic look. "Sorry, Jim. I could use a little freshening up, too," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. She stood up and left, without answering my question. Naturally, the conversation turned to why no woman ever goes to the restroom alone when out in a group. I was just starting to wonder why my friends were so determined to keep the conversation alive when Dee returned. Alone. "Where's Linda? Is she okay?" I practically shouted. "Relax, Jim," Dee said with a smile. "Linda's fine. She just had something to take care of. You don't need to worry about her. She's a grown woman, you know." What was that supposed to mean, I wondered. Sure, I worried about Linda, but she worried about me, too. After about 5 minutes of their teasing, and with Linda still gone, I'd had enough. I got up, carrying an empty plate as an excuse, and approached one of the female bartenders. "Excuse me, but my wife went to the restroom about 15 minutes ago and hasn't come back. She never takes that long. Could you check or send someone to make sure she's all right?" The bartender gave me a skeptical look. The plate in my hand sparked an idea. "The wings are great, and she enjoys spicy food, but sometimes it doesn't sit well with her. Honestly, I just want to make sure she's okay. Her name's Linda." "Let me show you a picture," I said, setting my plate down and pulling up Linda's photo on my phone. The bartender started looking a bit sympathetic when suddenly a voice spoke from beside me. "She's fine, you don't need to worry," Dee said almost apologetically. She turned to the bartender. "It's all good. I'll handle this," she added, placing a $5 bill on the counter. The bartender gave me a look, full of what seemed like sympathy, as she pocketed the money. "What? But wasn't she with you? You asked her to go, right?" I was totally confused. "Jim, she's not in the restroom. She left the club," Dee explained. It felt like I'd just been punched in the stomach. "Left? Without me? Why? What happened? Why didn't she tell me? Is she okay?" I asked, still not understanding. "Let's talk somewhere more private," Dee suggested. I followed her to the far end of the bar where it was quieter. She looked me straight in the eyes. "Jim, Linda loves you. She loves you and the kids more than anything, and she always will. You know that. But tonight, she's with Mark," she said. I stood there, dumbfounded, as my world fell apart. Images flashed through my mind. Linda at the top of the stairs in her stunning blue dress, Linda at dinner at the club, feeding each other wings. Linda in the arms of some jerk. The jerk in bed with Linda. My Linda. The mother of my children. The love of my life. I could feel the anger rising inside me. So on what was supposed to be our special night, she ran off with some jerk, I growled, glaring at Dee. "Jim, she hasn't left you. She'll be back tomorrow, and you'll have plenty of other special nights together," she said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She didn't even have the decency to tell me to my face. She just snuck out like a coward, I muttered. "And you helped her." "Jim, listen to me. She hasn't left you," Dee started again. "Well, if she hasn't left me, then where the hell is she? She's obviously not with me now, is she?" I was raising my voice and didn't care who could hear me. "Please calm down, people are staring at you. Listen, I know this hurts you, but it's just tonight. Linda knows, and we all know, that you're the only man for her, and you always will be. You're the good guy," Dee said in a patronizing tone. "Yeah, and we all know where the good guy ends up, don't we?" I said through gritted teeth. "Jim, it's not like that. You're making too much of this. It's just for tonight. She'll come back tomorrow, and everything will be just like it was," she tried to reassure me. I scoffed at her. If she truly believed that nonsense, there was no point arguing. "You don't understand. There is no tomorrow. So tell me, what part did you play in all of this? You didn't really need to go to the bathroom, did you? My wife gave you a signal, right? Told you to keep me busy long enough for her and that jerk to sneak away?" Dee looked down, ashamed, and nodded. "Yes, she asked me to do that. She didn't want you to make a scene while Mark was here. She also wanted me to remind you that she loves you and will always come home to you," she said. "Yeah, I'd remember just how much she loved me tonight for a long time." I could feel the anger building, my face heating up. More like she didn't want me to embarrass her while she walked away from her husband to spend the night with a jerk athlete, I snapped. Did it ever cross your mind to remind her she had a husband, a marriage, and she might lose it over this? Dee met my gaze. No, it didn't, Dee replied, because I know she won't lose you over this. You're too good a man to let that happen. I told her how lucky she is. She's lucky because the man every woman here wants her. And she's even luckier that she has a husband who loves her enough to get over his hurt and not make this more than it needs to be. She'll be willing to do whatever it takes to make it up to you. What if it's impossible to make it up to me? I asked. What if there's no fixing this? Jim, I know how much you love Linda, and how much she loves you. This doesn't have to be a big deal. It's just one night, one moment, compared to all the years and all the love you've shared. It's only a big deal if you make it one. She'll come back, and in time, you'll be okay, she said. Dee spoke softly but firmly. I wanted to grab her and shake some sense into her for believing such delusions. She must be living in a different world if she really thought that. So, if that jerk had chosen you like you wanted, would you have done the same thing? I asked her. I would, she shot back at me. Does Dave know that? I asked. No, and he doesn't need to because I don't think it will ever happen, she said softly. Maybe I should tell him, I said. Jim, please don't. Don't think like that. I know you're hurting, but that won't help. Please come back to the table. Let us distract you for a while. You haven't danced with me even once tonight, you know, she said with a smile. I wanted to dance with my wife, but thanks to you, her, and that jerk, that's not happening, is it? I also wanted to spend the night alone with her, but that's clearly not happening either, I said, turning my back on her and heading back to the table. The conversation at the table stopped as soon as I returned. The way everyone avoided eye contact said it all. All of our so-called friends knew that my wife and that jerk were making a fool out of me right at that moment. I felt like tearing the place apart, hunting him down, and kicking him so hard he'd feel it for a week. Jim, are you going to be okay? Dave asked nervously after seating Dee. I wanted to tell him what Dee had said and ask how he'd feel if it were him, but I couldn't get the words out. I guess I was still stuck playing the good guy. That would need to change. It depends on what you mean by okay, I replied. A couple of nervous laughs followed. I mean, yeah, what she did was awful, but you two will work through it, right? You're not going to divorce Linda over this, are you? Dave asked. Why wouldn't I? I said coldly. The entire table gasped. Why are you all acting so surprised? I asked. We've always been clear about how we feel about cheating. One strike and it's over. We agreed on that ages ago. But Jim, it's Mark Lavaliere, Dee interrupted. So what? I don't care who's sleeping with her. If it's not me, that's the end of it, I said angrily. I looked at Dave. How would you feel if it was Dee who left with that jerk for the night? Would you be okay with that? He blushed for a moment and then glanced at his wife, who was now staring intently at a spot on the floor. Jim, what about your kids? We all know how much they mean to you and how much they rely on you. Think of them before you make any decisions, Jane said. Her children were around the same age as mine, and they were best friends. Oh, like my wife is thinking about them right now, I replied. That's why you hired a sitter, so you wouldn't have to think about your kids, Dee chimed in. I think she was trying to be funny, but it fell flat. Come on, Jim. It's just one night. She'll never get another opportunity like this. You wouldn't divorce Linda over one night, she added. Why the hell not? I shot back, glaring at her. The room fell into an awkward silence. "Jim, try to see it from this perspective. Maybe it will help," Jane said, trying to be empathetic. "What if the Sports Illustrated swimsuit model was here tonight? Suppose she chose you out of everyone to dance with, and then offered to spend the night with you. Can you honestly say you wouldn't be tempted? Could you really turn her down?" Her pleading eyes, warm and sincere, usually had a way of getting what she wanted. But not tonight. I stood up and looked down at Jane. "Yes, I might be tempted, but I'd turn her down," I said firmly, "because I have a wife, and I don't want to hurt her. At least that's what I would have said before tonight." Another uncomfortable silence filled the air. I glanced around the table at what used to be my friends, all of whom were taking my unfaithful wife's side. At that moment, I wished I would never see any of them again. A tall, muscular bouncer approached our table. "Is there a problem here?" he asked in a low, deep voice. "Yeah, there is. A big one," I replied. I pulled out a $20 bill and tossed it on the table. "Don't worry, I'm leaving," I said, raising my hand in a gesture of peace. The bouncer nodded as I turned back to the group. "That will cover my tab, and since you're all covering for the cheater I came with, you can cover her bill too." I turned and stormed out of the club. As I walked the short distance to the hotel, my anger slowly cooled, replaced by an overwhelming sadness. Linda and I were supposed to be making this walk together, holding hands, teasing our friends about what they were planning once they got to their rooms, and being teased back. She should have been holding on to my arm like she used to, burying her face in my coat sleeve when the conversations turned too inappropriate. But instead, I was alone. Alone, I rode the elevator, trying not to think about all the moments Linda and I had shared in other hotel elevators. Alone, I entered what should have been our room. Alone, I faced the ruins of our special night. And alone, I stared at an uncertain future, unsure of what would come next. I turned on the light and closed the door behind me. Suddenly, an overwhelming weariness hit me. I dropped my winter coat on the floor and slouched toward the bedroom. There was a Godiva chocolate on each pillow. In the center of the bed, neatly laid out, was a bra and panty set I had never seen before. They were a deep dark blue, darker than her dress, with black lace trim. In my mind, I could picture her wearing them, with that unique blend of love and sensuality in her eyes, an expression that had once been reserved just for me, but tonight it belonged to someone else. I picked up the delicate lingerie gently, as if holding it could somehow bring her back. It didn't. Bitter tears rolled down my face. My wife, my lover, my best friend, had been taken by another man. He had simply reached out and taken her as though it was his right. He didn't care what she meant to me. To him, she was just a pretty distraction for the night, and she went along with it. I hadn't mattered enough to stop her. It was as if she, too, believed he had more of a claim on her than I did, after nearly 10 years of being a loyal, loving husband. Sure, it was just one night. And the next morning, I guessed. But what would he leave behind in her heart, her mind, her senses? How could I ever compare, let alone compete, with the city's hero, the charming playboy, Mark, the Ashley Lavaliere? I stopped crying long enough to wash my face, then gathered our things. I tossed the bra and panties into the trash. They didn't mean anything to me anymore. I went downstairs and checked us out of the hotel. I didn't care how Linda would get home. The desk clerk looked confused as I went through the process. "Is everything okay with your room, sir?" she asked. "The room was fine," I replied. "Is there anything we can do to make your stay better?" She continued. Yeah, I thought. Make the ashel vanish into a black hole, never to return. Turn back time and give me my wife back. I just shook my head. "No, there isn't. But thanks for asking," I said quietly. "We just had a sudden change of plans." The clerk gave me a sympathetic look, almost as if she could read my mind. "Have a nice evening, sir," she said as I walked away. "Sure. A nice evening." I got into my car and somehow made it home in one piece. Inside, I was a wreck, my emotions battling for control. Part of me was angrier than I had ever been in my life. Another part was devastated over the loss of my wife and my family. I walked into the old house we once lived in and was amazed at how quiet and empty it seemed. I dumped my luggage in the master bedroom, sat down and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. I checked my phone, hoping to find a message from Linda. Maybe she changed her mind, but there was nothing. I lay down on the bed, fully dressed, and dozed off. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I was woken up by the ringing of my phone. I saw several text messages from an unknown number. Could it have been Linda? I took out my phone, and what I saw made me lose my composure. There was a series of photos and short videos. One showed my wife with a man. A short video showed the same thing. "Isn't it better than spending time with that weakling you were with tonight?" I heard him ask. "Oh my God, yes," Linda replied. I was on the verge of a heart attack, but I took a few deep breaths and continued to watch. I kept looking at photos and videos, and every time I got worse and worse. But then in one of the videos I heard it. Her lover was looking directly into the camera and seemed to be addressing me. "I do not know who you are," he said, "and frankly, I do not care. But I want you to know that of all the wives I've been with, yours is the best. I'll do it with her a lot more often, so trust me. Maybe one day I'll let you watch us. She doesn't seem to mind the idea. There's nothing personal about it, just intimacy. I'll try not to spoil her mood too much for you," he added with a grin. I briefly wondered how he had gotten my number before realizing he must have accessed Linda's phone while she was in the bathroom, then sent me the images and video. I threw my phone down in frustration, then had a sudden thought. At this point, divorcing Linda was a no-brainer. I was done with her, permanently. But that jerk would pay. I vowed he would pay for ruining my happy life and my family. I went to my computer, transferred the images and video onto it, then drafted an email to all of our so-called friends, the ones who had enabled this and covered for her as she left with the jerk. I attached the videos and photos and sent the email with the subject line, "Happy now?" For the next several hours, I went into a frenzy, tossing all of her clothes and belongings into trash bags and cramming them into her car. By the time I finished, there was barely enough space left for her to sit and drive. I took her car out of the garage, changed the code so she couldn't get back in, and removed the garage door opener from her car. But I wasn't done yet. I turned my attention to everything that reminded me of our marriage. The portrait over the fireplace, our wedding album, her wedding dress, the bride and groom glasses on the mantel, and a crystal vase she loved. I destroyed everything. When I was done, the inside of the house resembled a war zone, with broken pieces of portraits, trinkets, glass shards, and silk scattered everywhere. At one point, I suddenly needed to use the bathroom and had a strange thought. I took off my wedding ring and accidentally dropped it into the toilet along with the waste. I almost flushed it immediately, but had a change of heart and decided to wait. Feeling mentally exhausted and running on adrenaline, I sat down with a cup of coffee. I heard something hit the door and realized it was the morning paper. I hadn't realized how much time had passed. I grabbed the paper and went back to the kitchen table. My shock grew when I opened the paper and saw a teaser about Ash Lee. Flipping to the sports section, I saw massive headlines asking, "Who is Mark Lavaliere's new girlfriend?" What? Below the headline were several color photos of Ashish, Layla, and Linda leaving a club. It seemed a paparazzi had snapped them together. Linda was clinging to his arm and gazing at him with the same adoration she used to show me. One photo even showed them kissing before she got into his Jaguar without a care. My embarrassment was complete. Now the entire city knows about it. The article was full of speculation and generalities since no one had interviewed them yet. I visited the paper's website and found an online version with photos and video. I copied the link and sent it to our so-called friends with the subject line, "Fuck you all to hell." I glanced at my watch and saw it was 5:30 a.m. I knew Linda's mother would be awake, preparing breakfast for her husband, as he was an early riser, so I decided to call. "Hello?" she answered. "Is everything all right?" "No, it isn't, Mom," I replied. I had a good relationship with them and always called them Mom and Dad. "What's the matter, dear?" she inquired. "Is it the kids?" "No," I said. "Did you see the newspaper this morning?" "Not yet," she responded. "Alfred likes to read it with his coffee." "Why?" "He might want to skip the sports section," I said. "There's an article about Mark Lavaliere that he might find upsetting." "Alfred thinks highly of him," Linda's mother noted. "He might change his mind after reading this," I said. "Linda left me stranded at the club we went to with him last night, and they were spotted by paparazzi getting into his car." "Oh my God," she exclaimed. "Where is Linda now?" "She's still with him," I said. "What, did she spend the night with him?" she asked. "Yeah," I replied. "That's the gist of it. I don't know if or when she's coming back, but if she does, I'm kicking her out and she'll need somewhere to stay." "All right," she said. "Alfred is not going to be pleased about this, and neither am I. Is there any chance you can work things out?" "No, Mom, there isn't," I said. She deliberately turned her back on me and left with him, and our so-called friends covered for her. "I'm so sorry, Jim," she said. "We raised her better than this. Of course she can stay here if she needs to. What about the kids?" "They're with a babysitter for the night," I said. "I might need to ask my parents to watch them for the rest of the weekend." "Okay," she said. "Let me know if there's anything I can do." "Thanks, Mom, I appreciate it," I said. I had another idea and went back to my computer. I found the link to the article about Mark Lavaliere and logged into Linda's Facebook account. I posted the link on her timeline with the caption, "Guess what? I made the front page of the sports section. I went on a date with my sluggish husband and ended up spending the night with a real stud, lucky me." I thought it would cause some gossip, but I'm not done yet. I tracked down the email address of the reporter who wrote the article. Since I've already been publicly shamed, I decided to give it my all. I sent a brief email to the reporter describing what happened, and attached a video of the jerk threatening to continue a relationship with Linda. I provided my contact details for a follow-up call, and then sent an email with a sinister laugh that Snidely Whiplash would be proud of. At 8 o'clock, I called Mrs. Porter to ask if my parents would mind picking up the kids this morning. She confirmed that everything was fine and asked if I had seen the sports section in the newspaper. "Yes," I replied. "Was it really Linda?" "What is it?" she asked. "Unfortunately, yes," I replied. "That's why I asked the parents to pick up the children. I don't want them here when she gets back." "Is she still with him?" "What is it?" she asked, clearly shocked. "Yes," I replied. And I would appreciate it if you didn't tell the kids anything yet." "I understand," she said. "I'm so sorry, Jim. You don't deserve this." "Thank you," I said, ending the conversation. My next call was to my mom. "Jim, is everything okay?" she asked when she answered. "Your father just read the newspaper and got furious. Was it really Linda?" "Yes, Mom," I replied. "She's still not at home." "Could you pick up the kids from Mrs. Porter's this morning? I think they should stay with you until the end of the weekend. There will be complete chaos here." "Of course, dear," she said. "I understand. What are you going to do?" "Unleash hell, Mom," I said. "Whatever you do, think about the children first, okay? They're the most important thing right now," she advised. "I know, Mom," I said. "But thanks for the reminder and for picking them up." We ended the conversation, and I took a cup of coffee. I wanted to smoke a cigarette, but I restrained myself. Around 9:30, my phone rang. It was Dee. "What?" I blurted out. "Jim, it's just me, Dee," she said. "I know it's you," I replied. "What do you want?" "Jim, I saw the morning paper, and I wanted to apologize. I never thought that the situation would escalate so much," she said. "What did you expect would happen?" I asked. "My wife runs off with a star football player, a so-called hero in the community, after a night out. Surely you must have known someone would be watching him. And by the way, it's even worse than you think," I added. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You'll see soon enough. Also, have you checked Linda's Facebook page?" I asked. "No, I haven't," she replied. "Why?" "Take a look," I said. "And have you checked your email?" "Not yet," she said. "I like to have my morning coffee first." "Well, all your answers are there," I said. "I hope you're satisfied." I ended the call before she could respond, but I expected she'd call back. I received a few more calls afterward. One was from Jane, who was thoroughly appalled by the videos and pictures Ash had sent. "Why are you so shocked?" I asked. "I never thought he'd actually do something like that," she said. "Are you suggesting that I either sleep with my wife or send photos and videos?" I asked. A real pillar of society, isn't it? "Jim, what are you going to do?" "What is it?" she asked. "What do you think about it?" I replied. "You should all be very pleased. And now goodbye and leave me alone." I hung up and tried to relax over a cup of coffee, but my phone rang again. Although I didn't recognize the number, I answered. "Mr. Thomas Carlyle?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, that's him," I replied. "This is Audrey Tanis from the Daily Record. I received an email and a video from you earlier. Is the woman seen with Mark Lavalier last night your wife?" "What is it?" she asked. "Yeah, that's her with that jerk we saw last night," I said. "Who?" she asked. "Sorry, it's just my nickname for him," I explained. "I understand," she said. "And you're saying that the woman with him is your wife?" "What is it?" she asked. "My future ex-wife," I clarified. "So you're getting divorced because of this?" "What is it?" she asked. "Absolutely," I confirmed. "Did you mention in your email that you have other videos and photos?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Would you like to see them? They are quite outspoken." "I wish I could," she said. "If we use any of them, we will try to make the graphic content more blurry. Can we arrange a meeting to discuss this? I'd like to hear your story." "Of course," I agreed. "But I'd rather wait until she gets home." "Is she still not at home?" Audrey asked. "Not yet," I replied. "Okay, call me when you're free and we can meet to discuss this in more detail," she said. "It will be done," I said. We ended the conversation, and I put the phone back in my pocket. I decided to take a look at her Facebook page and noticed a lot of comments on my previous post. The reaction was mixed. Some people congratulated her and asked how she spent time with this jerk, while others sharply criticized her for the way she treated me. Several of her male friends called her derogatory names and said they would kick her out if their wives behaved like that. I noticed that she had lost quite a few friends on Facebook, and I couldn't help but smile. It was almost 11 o'clock when Linda walked in the door. I looked up from the table and saw a Jaguar driving away from the house. "Jim, it's me," she said, pulling her key from the door. "I'm home," she added, as if spending the night with a lover was routine. "By the way, why is my car in the driveway and not in the garage? And what's all that stuff in it?" Her eyes widened when she saw me sitting at the table. I knew I must have looked awful. Her face went pale as she glanced around the house, which was an absolute wreck. "Oh my God," she gasped. "Well, what did you do? Everything's destroyed. Our wedding photo, my vase, the glasses, and what's that smell?" "I just finished what you started last night," I replied. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked. I shrugged. "Why do you care?" I shot back. "Look, I'm sorry about what happened last night," she said. "But I'm here now. I'm still your wife." I shook my head as she moved closer, trying to kiss my cheek. I stopped her. "Don't touch me," I said. She looked shocked, as if I'd slapped her. "And no, you're not my wife. Not anymore. It's all in the papers. It's gone viral on the internet, too. Guess that's what happens when you're with someone like him." I opened the newspaper, showing her the spread with the color photos. "Oh no," she whispered, horrified. "How did they get those pictures?" "I'm not his girlfriend, no matter what it says. Does it even matter?" I asked. "You had your moment and now we're done." "I need to use the bathroom. Then we can talk," she said. I followed her into the master bathroom, watching her recoil at the mess still sitting in the toilet. "Is that your ring in the toilet? What is it?" she asked, her eyes wide with amazement. I nodded. "Yes," I replied. "Since you ruined our marriage, I decided to make it official." I took her left hand and examined the rings. "What are you doing?" she asked in confusion. "What is it?" I pointed to the dried spot on her wedding ring. "It looks like something inappropriate." "I don't understand what you're talking about," she stammered. "Don't lie," I said, taking out my phone. I opened the message that this jerk sent me and showed a video of him smearing her rings. Her face paled when I pressed play. "You didn't just embarrass me in front of our friends. You humiliated me in front of everyone. And now this? In relation to the symbols of our marriage?" I felt anger rising in me. Shaking my head, I grabbed a napkin and took the rings off it. "What are you doing?" she screamed. She gasped when I threw the rings down the toilet. I flushed the water, watching them disappear. Her scream echoed as she realized what had just happened. "My rings!" she exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. "You washed them off. How could you? You have to return them." "No," I said coldly. "How could you? I've loved you for over 10 years, and this is how you repay me? To hell with you." "It was just one night," she pleaded. "We still have things ahead of us." I picked up my phone, playing another part of the video where the jerk bragged that he was still sleeping with her, maybe even while I was watching. "Is it true?" I asked. "Is that what you want? Sleeping with him in our bed while I'm watching?" Maybe it came up in conversation, but I didn't think he was serious. She muttered. "It was just a bed conversation." "Like this?" I asked, showing her the video where she humiliated me while that guy was with her. She shook her head. "I didn't mean that," she said. "Well, I mean this, you bit H," I snapped. "Get out." And let your lover know if he sets foot in this house, I'll kill him where he stands. Now get out before I throw you out." "But I live here too," she protested. I shook my head. "Not anymore," I replied. "I'm seeing a lawyer Monday to file for divorce. You don't live here anymore. Your stuff's in your car and your mom's expecting you. From this moment on, you're dead to me, got it? Dead. I never want to see your face again. Now get out." "But what about the kids?" she cried. "What about them?" I said. "You didn't care about them or me when you went off with that guy." "That's not true." "And stop calling him that," she pleaded. "Screw you," I shot back. "Oh wait, he already did. Any guy who would just take a married woman without a second thought is an ashel in my book. He knew you were married, and this isn't the first time he's done this. You didn't even hesitate when he took you, and now you're defending him to me. You've made your choice. Now get out of my sight. You make me sick." She stepped back, tears streaming down her face. "Go, damn it!" She flinched at my shout and ran downstairs, sobbing. I followed her, grabbed her purse before she could, pulled out her keys and removed the house key. I threw the purse back at her. "Please don't do this," she begged in the living room. "I'll make it up to you. Just don't throw me away like this. I never meant to hurt you. I love you." I had never seen such pain on someone's face, but I didn't care how she felt in that moment. I pointed to the door. "Too bad, because right now, I hate you. For the last time, get out," I said. Trembling and crying, she left. I watched her get in her car, wiping tears from her face as she drove away. Once the confrontation was over, I collapsed onto the couch, completely drained, and fell asleep immediately. I woke up later that afternoon and forced myself to head upstairs for a hot shower. So much had changed in the past 24 hours. In that short time, I went from being a happily married man with 2 amazing kids to, well, what exactly? After getting dressed, I checked the time and decided to call Audrey. I was surprised when she picked up on the first ring. "Audrey, it's Jim Carlyle," I said. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carlyle," she replied. "You sound a bit better." "Yeah, I got some sleep, so I'm feeling a little more rested." "Is it too late to meet up this afternoon?" I asked. "Not at all," she said. "A reporter's work is never done, you know." I laughed at that. "It's almost dinner time. Would you mind meeting somewhere quiet where we can talk?" "Not at all," I said. "Where do you suggest?" "Well, there's that new place near the mall, Sherry's. It's usually quiet, so we can talk undisturbed," she said. "Yeah, I know the spot," I replied. "I'll meet you there." After hanging up, I made one more call to my mom to check on the kids. They were watching Frozen again, but paused it to talk to me. "Where's Mom?" Emma asked. "She's staying with her mom for now," I replied. "Why isn't she at home with you?" she pressed. "We're working through some things," I said. "It's all right. You'll see her soon." "I've got to meet someone now, but I'll call later, okay?" "Okay, Daddy," she said. "Bye." My heart ached. Not only had Linda and that jerk destroyed my marriage, but they also messed up my kids' lives, and for that, I would never forgive them. With a heavy sigh, I left the house and drove to Sherry's. When I arrived, I was shown to a table in the corner where a young, pretty brunette sat with her laptop open. She looked up when I approached, stood up, and introduced herself. We both placed our orders and the waitress left. "Mr. Carlyle," she said. "Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you as well, Ms. Tanis," I replied. "Please call me Jim." "Thank you," she responded. "And please call me Audrey. I want to start by offering an apology." "An apology?" I asked. "For what?" "Well, those photos in the paper this morning were mine," she said. You took those? I asked, and she nodded. I was at the club last night with some friends, she explained. A girls' night out. We were just having some fun, and I happened to notice Marc Lavaliere. I saw him go over to your table and then return to the dance floor with that woman. From the way they were acting, I never imagined she might be married. When they left the club, I followed them outside and took some pictures and video. The photos in the paper are nothing compared to what I captured. My God, I exclaimed. I have everything written down, and I can give you a copy if you want, she offered. I filmed it on my camera, so it's okay. Would you like to see it? Of course, I replied. She handed me the tablet and turned on the video. I watched Linda and that guy walk into the parking lot, hugging each other like Linda and I used to do. She seemed to like it. She grabbed him back. When they reached his car, he turned her around and they kissed. Looking at this, you would never have guessed that she was married. She got into the car and he slid into the driver's seat. They kissed again. Watching this, it became clear that she had completely forgotten about me and the children. When the video ended, I returned the tablet to her. As I said, I'm very sorry about this, she apologized. I quickly packed up something and sent it to the newspaper, and then returned to the house. When I got there, you had already left. So, would you like to tell me your version of events? I nodded and told her about the evening from my point of view. Then I took out my phone and gave it to her along with the headphones. You might want to take a look at this, I suggested. The videos are pretty explicit. I can handle it, she said, putting on her headphones. When she did, our food arrived. I watched her reaction while I ate. At first, her expression did not change, but as she continued to observe, her expression began to change. When she was done, she returned my phone to me. Well, I asked. This confirms some of what I've heard, she said. A lot of this sounds like normal locker room talk guys bragging and exaggerating. But there were rumors on the internet that he had been a good player for a while. However, I have not been able to prove anything. It's like the good old guys protecting each other, you know? I can imagine, I said. So what are you planning to do? She asked. I'm going to get a divorce, I replied. She was aware of my views on fidelity, but she clearly didn't care. She got what she wanted, so now we're done. Any children? She inquired. Yes, a son and a daughter, I said. They're 6 and 4 years old. She shook her head. It's always hardest on the kids, she remarked. Yes, it is, I agreed. What about him? Mark? She asked. I shrugged. I'm not sure yet, I said. I'm still considering that. Part of me wants to take him down, but I don't want to end up in jail. He's a star football player, she noted. No offense, but I doubt you'd get far if you tried. I chuckled. What's so funny? She asked. Let's just say it wouldn't be the first time someone underestimated me, I said. Size isn't everything, you know. What do you mean by that? She asked. My dad used to say it's not the size of the dog in the fight that counts, but the size of the fight in the dog, I explained. She nodded. I understand, she said. So, are you looking to stir up trouble? No, I said. I have 2 kids to think about, but I'm not just going to give up without a fight. Have you spoken to a lawyer yet? She asked. I haven't had the chance, and this all just happened last night, I said. She took out a card from her purse and handed it to me. A good friend of mine is a family law attorney, she said. She has a strong dislike for cheaters and isn't too fond of Lavaliere either. I can give her a heads up if you'd like. The card read, Lisa Hawkins, attorney at law. Thanks, I appreciate it, I said. I don't mean to look a gift horse in the mouth, but I'm curious why you're helping me. That's a fair question, she said. As a reporter, I have an eye for compelling stories. I'd like to be the one to share yours, if you're okay with that. Also, I have a thing about seeing guys like Lavaliere get what they deserve. Is this something personal for you, then? I asked. Kind of, she replied. So, what is it that you want from me? I asked. An exclusive? Something along those lines, she said. What exactly does that entail? I inquired. It means you allow me to present your perspective and help manage the information flow, she explained. Who is us? I asked. Lisa and I, she clarified. And what's in it for me? I asked. First, it provides you some protection from others who will be interested in your story, she said. I understand how people like Lavaliere operate. This story is already going viral. I'm sure he and his team are working on a spin that will make you look bad. That's their game. If you react impulsively, they'll destroy you quickly. Don't expect any leniency from the national sports media. They're just as ruthless as anyone else in the news industry. You'll need someone who knows how to handle the media sharks, and they will come after you once they know her identity. So what's our plan? I asked. Have you considered taking legal action against Lavaliere? She asked. Yes, I have, I responded. I've been considering a lot of things. All right, she said. Let me see if I can draw them out a bit and find out their next move. I'd like to run a teaser in tomorrow's paper about you possibly pursuing legal action for the damage done to your marriage and family. Is that all right with you? I mulled over her suggestion before answering. I knew she was right, and that Linda's identity would likely be leaked soon. It might be better to address it before they had a chance to further embarrass me. Okay, I said, but we need to work together on this, and I want veto power if I think it might harm the kids. Agreed, she said. I'll start making some calls and get things moving. By the way, you should be aware that local news stations will be covering this tonight. I've already been contacted by several of them. What did you tell them? I inquired. I haven't said anything yet, she replied. I wanted to speak with you first. I appreciate that, I responded. We finished our meal and said our goodbyes. I hoped I was making the right decision. Checking the time, I decided to visit the kids and talk to my parents about everything. Looking at my phone, I saw there were no calls or messages from Linda. Arriving at my parents' house, I went inside. The kids rushed to greet me, and I hugged and kissed them warmly. Where's Mommy? Emma asked. She's with her parents, I answered. Why? Emma asked. She has some things to take care of, I said, trying not to reveal too much too soon. My parents came into the room, and we exchanged hugs before sitting down. Are you okay, son? My father asked. I shook my head. Not really, Dad, I said. I'm doing better than before, but it's still tough. I understand, he said. At that moment, the news came on TV. My father, a news enthusiast, turned up the volume, and we watched the broadcast despite the children's complaints about it being boring. Shortly into the broadcast, something grabbed all our attention. Now, for our Talk of the Town segment, the male anchor announced. This morning, the Daily Record reported that star football player Mark Lavaliere was seen leaving a local nightclub with what appears to be a new girlfriend. Video posted by the paper shows them leaving the club and getting into his car. The scene shifted to a brief video from earlier that day, showing Linda and another man walking arm in arm, with Linda's face clearly visible as she turned to kiss him. Daddy, why is Mommy kissing that man? Emma asked, clearly shocked. Is he her boyfriend? Just watch the news, Emma, I told her. Timmy didn't fully understand what his sister said, but it was obvious he wasn't happy. The anchor continued. We spoke with Audrey Tanis, the reporter who broke this story, and she confirmed that the woman who is married has been identified. Tanis also mentioned that the woman's husband has not given permission to release her name. We reached out to Lavaliere and the Sharks management but received no response. According to Tanis, more information may be available as soon as tomorrow, the anchor said. Dad turned off the TV, and Mom hurried the kids into their bedroom. "Come on, kids," she said, guiding them into the other room. Dad turned to me. "What are you planning to do, son?" he asked. "I'm filing for divorce, Dad," I replied. He gave a nod. "I don't blame you," he said. "But you should know she'll probably end up with the kids while you'll be left financially drained." "That's likely," I said, "but I can't stay with her. Not after everything that's happened." By the way, I talked to the reporter who broke the story. "Oh?" he inquired. "Yes," I said. "She's offered to share my side and help me out. The next few days are going to be rough. This is just the start. Once the media gets hold of it, it's going to turn into a circus." By then, my mother had returned and joined us. "Listen, if needed, the kids can stay here for a while," she said. "At least this way, they won't be hassled by a bunch of reporters." "Your mother's right, son," Dad said. "They can stay here as long as necessary." I paused before responding. "You're right," I said. "Thanks. I'll bring over more of their things tomorrow. If you need anything else, just let me know." "Linda will want to see them," my mother said. "Technically, we can't stop her without a restraining order." "I know," I said. "God, this is all such a mess. Why did she do this? She must have known it wouldn't end well." "Hard to say, son," my father replied. "Do what you need to do. We'll help however we can. Just don't do anything rash." "Thanks, Dad," I said. We hugged, and I went in to spend some time with the kids. Little Emma came to me with tears in her eyes. "Are you getting a divorce?" she asked. I couldn't lie to her and pretend everything would be okay. "It looks that way, sweetheart," I said. "But remember, no matter what happens, we all love you very, very much." I held her as she cried on my shoulder. "Damn you, Linda," I thought. "Damn you to hell." After spending some time with the children, I went back to the front room. "I need to head out," I said. "I have to get the place cleaned up a bit." My mother came out with a dish of lasagna. "Take this with you," she said. "You need to keep up your strength." "Thanks, Mom," I said, taking the dish. I love lasagna, and my mother's was the best I'd ever tasted. We said our goodbyes, and I left for home. When I got home, I put the lasagna in the fridge and checked Linda's Facebook page. The post was still up and had reached over 500,000 people, with numerous comments. Most were harsh, with some calling her a girl of easy virtue, bit H, or a girl of easy virtue. I also saw she had lost nearly 3/4 of her friends. Smiling to myself, I turned off the computer. I cleaned up the mess from the previous night and was about to reheat the lasagna my mother had given me when I heard the doorbell ring. Damn, I thought. I went to the door and peered through the peephole. It was Dee and Dave. What the hell did they want? I cracked the door open. "What do you want?" I growled. They both recoiled in surprise. Can we talk, Jim?" Dee asked. "Please?" "Why?" I replied. "Because we're friends and we're worried about you," she said. I snorted. "Friends?" I asked. "With friends like you, who needs enemies? Please, Jim, can we come in and talk for just a minute?" Dee pleaded. I hesitated, then let them inside. They looked around, stunned. Everything of Linda's was gone except for the remnants of the destroyed wedding portrait that still hung over the fireplace. "So what do you want?" I asked, grabbing a cup of coffee for myself. I didn't offer them anything, and I could tell they noticed. They didn't comment on it, though. "Jim, first of all, we want to apologize for last night," Dee said. "I saw the videos you sent and read the report. We didn't realize it would be that bad, and we're really sorry." "You didn't know, huh?" I asked with disdain. "But you knew she was married when you practically shoved her into his bed, didn't you?" "Yeah, we did," Dee admitted. "More to the point, Linda knew she was married when she left with him," I added. "The plain truth is, none of you cared, not even Linda. You all knew she was married, but none of you bothered to stop her. You couldn't get him between her legs fast enough, could you?" They looked at each other, visibly ashamed. "All that talk about one and done didn't mean a damn thing, did it?" I asked. I suppose not," Dee replied, stammering. "You know, Linda's in a terrible state right now. We're really worried about her. She just lies in bed at her mom's house, crying all the time. I'm afraid she's on the brink of a breakdown." I walked over to my bookcase, grabbed a hefty dictionary, and threw it onto the coffee table. The loud thud made them both flinch. "You want sympathy?" I asked, gesturing toward the dictionary. "Look between shit and syphilises and you'll find it there. You won't get any from me, and neither will she." They stared at me, stunned. "My God, this has really devastated you, hasn't it?" Dave asked. "You have no fucking clue," I replied. "I'm this close to snapping and doing something drastic," I said, holding my thumb and forefinger less than a millimeter apart. "Besides not owning a gun, the only reason I haven't acted out is because someone needs to think about the kids. God knows neither you nor Linda did last night." "So it's true, then, that you flushed your rings down the toilet and told her she was dead to you," Dee said. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "She trashed our marriage, so I just finished what she started." "So what are you going to do now?" Dave asked. "That should be obvious," I said. "Thanks to all of you, I've been humiliated in front of the whole goddamn world. That article has gone viral and has at least 1 million views by now. Anyone who knows Linda can clearly see it's her. So I have no choice but to divorce her slimy ass." I turned to Dee. "And you'll be included as well," I added. "Me?" Dee asked, bewildered. "Why?" "Because for all intents and purposes, you helped her ruin our family," I said. "It's like being an accomplice to a crime. You could have stopped her, but you chose not to, and then you tried to justify your actions to me. By the way, have you told your husband what you told me?" Dave looked at her, frowning. "What did you tell him?" he asked. Dee looked down, her face flushed. He turned back to me. "What did she say?" "She told me that if Ashel had approached her instead of Linda, she would have done the exact same thing Linda did. And she was quite proud of it," I said. Dave turned to her, clearly enraged. "Is that so?" he inquired. "We'll talk about this when we get home." She shot me a frustrated look. "I told you not to tell him," she said. I shrugged. "Too bad," I replied. "I believe your husband deserves to know the truth about you, don't you?" "So, is this the end?" she asked. "Pretty much," I answered. They stood up to leave, but Dee made one last attempt on Linda's behalf. "I understand if you don't want to stay friends with us," she said. "But can you find it in your heart to forgive Linda just this once? She really does love you." I shook my head. "Are you really that dense, Dee?" I asked. "No, I can't forgive her. I never will. Her betrayal devastated me, and you helped her. I can never view either of you the same way again." Dee's face fell as she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." I said nothing, just nodded in response. Yeah, I thought, she is sorry. Dave extended his hand, then reconsidered and withdrew it. I'm sorry too, he said. We all are. I suppose we'll see you around. I grunted in reply, not feeling like engaging with my former friends. I watched them walk away, Dee brushing away tears. I closed and locked the door, then went to the kitchen to eat dinner. Later, I lay down on my bed, exhausted, and fell asleep quickly. The next morning, I got up, went through my routine, and picked up my paper from the front porch before making coffee. I considered making bacon and eggs with the large cast-iron skillet Linda kept on the stove, but decided against it. After finishing a bowl of cereal and a slice of toast, I opened the paper and went to the sports section. A headline read, "Jilted Husband Considers Legal Action Against Sharks," and tight end Mark Lavaliere. I thought this would be interesting. Audrey did a great job summarizing our conversation from the day before. She had wisely chosen to keep my name out of it, indicating that I had spoken under the condition of anonymity. The article stated, "The man who claims to be the woman's husband also provided explicit video evidence that depicts intimacy activity between a woman he says is his wife and Lavaliere. One video features a man, presumably Lavaliere, taunting him by stating that he would continue having intimacy with the woman, potentially even in the man's own bed, while he was forced to watch." The article continued, "The husband alleges that his wife's friends helped her escape with Lavaliere. Attempts to reach these individuals have so far been unsuccessful." It also mentioned, "Lavaliere's contract with the team includes a stringent morals clause. Breaching this contract and failing to enforce the clause could expose the team to legal action." The article concluded, "We reached out to both team management and Lavaliere for comment." The team did not respond, and Lavaliere simply stated, "No comment." I finished reading, satisfied, and took a sip of my coffee. My phone buzzed with a text from Audrey. "Hope you read the paper this morning," the text said. I replied, "Yes, I did." "Great article. Thanks." She texted back, "YVW. You're very welcome," followed by another, "Expect a call soon. TTFN." I thanked her once more and put my phone back in my pocket. Sure enough, it buzzed again a few seconds later. I checked and saw a call from an unfamiliar number. I answered, curious about who it could be. "Jim Carlisle," I said. "Mr. Carlisle, this is Lisa Hawkins." A warm female voice responded. "I got your number from Audrey Tanis and wanted to give you a call. I hope I'm not interrupting you at a bad time." "These days there are no good times," I said. "But I'm glad you called, Ms. Hawkins. How can I help you?" "Well, it's more about what I can do for you," she said. "You can start by just calling me Lisa." "Okay, Lisa," I replied. "And please call me Jim." "Thanks, Jim," she responded. "Audrey mentioned you last night, and I wanted to reach out after you read her article. I assume you've already seen it." "I have," I said. "She did a great job." "I agree," she nodded. "Jim, I'd like to represent you if that's all right. Is it true you're thinking about filing a lawsuit against Lavaliere and the team as well as going through with the divorce?" "Yes, that's right," I confirmed. "Well, you're in luck," she said. "Because here, adultery isn't just grounds for divorce, it's actually illegal, even if it's not usually enforced. Plus, you can sue for alienation of affection. I think you have a strong case. You've got kids, right?" "Yes," I said. "A boy and a girl." "Are you planning to seek custody?" she asked. "Absolutely," I replied. "That could be tricky, but we can certainly push for it," she said. "I'd like to get started today. Can you bring all your financial documents and any evidence you have of the affair to my office tomorrow morning, say 8 a.m.? "Sure," I said. "What about your fee? Don't you need a retainer?" Normally, yes, she said, but I'm willing to take this on pro bono for free. Thanks, but why would you do that? I asked. I'll explain one day, just not over the phone, she said. All right, I replied. One more thing, Jim, she added. What's that? I asked. After this morning's article, the Sharks' legal team will probably contact you. Don't give in. Just tell them they'll be hearing from your lawyer. Can you handle that? Of course, I assured her. Good, she said, and don't do anything reckless. I laughed at that. I won't, I promise, I said. We exchanged goodbyes and ended the call. Checking the time, I decided to go see my kids. After heading back upstairs and changing into clean jeans and a shirt, I heard a knock at the door. Peering through the peephole, I saw two men in dark suits. Probably the Sharks' lawyers, I thought, recalling Lisa's advice. I opened the door. What can I do for you? I asked calmly. Mr. Carlyle, one of the men introduced himself. I'm Roger Billings, and this is Jack Dunstan. We're from the Sharks. Can we come in and talk to you for a few minutes? Suddenly it dawned on me who Dunstan was. I had seen his pictures in newspapers and on TV. He was the owner of the Sharks. I assumed Roger was probably a lawyer. I opened the door and invited them in. Please come in, I said. Would you like something to drink? No, but thanks anyway, Jack replied. We won't take up much of your time. We just want to talk to you. The situation with Mark Lavalier. The situation? I repeated. You mean the part where he ruined my marriage, destroyed my family, and threatened to sleep with my wife in my own bed? Is this the situation you mean? Well, yeah, Jack muttered, clearly embarrassed by my bluntness. He looked at Roger. Show him the offer. Let's wrap this up. Roger opened his briefcase, took out an envelope in a folder, and handed the envelope to me. I opened it and, looking inside, felt my face flush with anger. Is everything all right, Mr. Carlyle? Jack asked. You must be joking, I said. Is there a problem? Roger asked. Everything looks right. $1,000? I asked incredulously. Are you offering me $1,000 for what this guy did to me and my family? This is not an offer, but an insult. Wait, Mr. Carlyle, Jack interrupted him. This does not include season tickets for life and unlimited items in our store. It costs quite a bit. I almost laughed out loud. And in exchange for what exactly? I asked. Roger opened the folder and showed me the unsigned agreement. As stated here, all we ask is that no legal action be brought against the team or Mr. Lavalier, Roger said. I looked through the document, amazed by what I had read. And you won't do anything about Lavalier? I asked. What about the moral principles clause in his contract? Roger just shrugged his shoulders. Listen, Mr. Carlyle, Jack said. Boys are boys. Lavalier is a valuable player in the team and is respected in society. We just ask you to reconsider any lawsuits. No one wants their reputation to suffer. I'm sure you can understand that. What I understand is that Lavalier ruined my marriage, I said. He has already defamed my name. Photos and articles showing him with my wife were scattered everywhere. What about my children? How do you plan to compensate them for the loss of their mother and family? Do you think tickets and some team souvenirs will help fix this? What do you expect from us? Jack asked with a hint of superiority. I do not know, I replied with biting sarcasm. Maybe you could fix the situation with my wife, or rewind time to Thursday and prevent this jerk from ever meeting her. Both men stared at me in disbelief. Mr. Carlyle, we can't do any of this, Roger said carefully. Maybe you have another suggestion. My lawyer will contact you. The meeting is over. Get out. They exchanged glances, stood up, and Jack held out his hand to shake mine, but I ignored it. They nodded awkwardly and left. After they left, I called Lisa to tell her the latest news, then contacted my parents and went to them to spend time with the children. Emma was still shocked to see Linda with another man. I talked to my parents for a while before I decided to take the kids to Chuck E. Cheese, just to distract them and cheer them up. For a couple of hours, they were just kids again, laughing and playing. But like all good things, it ends sometime. They protested a little but followed me to the car, without much noise. When we got home, we packed up their things to take them to their grandparents. But then suddenly the front door swung open. The door frame had split open, and this jerk was standing on the threshold, seething with rage. "You're a jerk," he growled. "You're finished. All I wanted to do was act a little bit, and you had to turn it into a huge legal mess." I tried to answer, but his fist slammed into my face, causing me to stumble. When I came to my senses, I realized that I needed to protect myself somehow. I couldn't handle it with my fists alone. I heard Emma scream and turned around just in time to see this jerk hit her. A wave of rage swept over me, and I remembered the cast-iron pan on the stove. I grabbed her, holding her by the handle like a baseball bat, and rushed into the living room. I swung it at him with all my might. The frying pan hit him hard on the head. He collapsed to the floor, but even then my anger was not quenched. I started kicking him in the groin with all the strength I had again and again. Then I took a step back, ran at him, and kicked his head as hard as I could. His body, now lifeless, flew a few feet before collapsing by the couch. I grabbed the skillet and knelt beside his head, raising it high above me, ready to bring it crashing down on him, hoping to rid the world of Marc Lavaliere once and for all. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Drop the skillet, sir," a man said. I let go, hearing the iron clang as it hit the floor, and slowly turned around. "Stay where you are, hands behind your head." I followed the officer's instructions, placing my hands behind my head. He cuffed me, ensuring I wasn't a threat before standing me up. "Officer, he broke into my home and struck my daughter," I explained. Glancing over, I saw Emma sobbing in front of the fireplace, a red mark on her face where the jerk had hit her. "I know," the officer replied. "Your neighbor saw him kick the door in and hit your daughter, then called 911. I came as fast as I could. Are you okay?" Was I really that quick, I wondered? "My face feels like hell," I said, rubbing my jaw. He looked at me and nodded. "Yeah, you'll probably have a black eye," he said. He then went over to Emma, checking on her. Luckily, she wasn't physically harmed, but she was clearly shaken and scared. After making a call on his radio, he returned to me. "Officer, can I please call my parents to come and get the kids?" I asked. He paused for a moment, surveying the room before responding. "Do you have a gun?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, officer. That's why I grabbed the skillet," I replied. "All right," he said, removing the handcuffs. "But I'll still need to take your statement." "Thank you," I said, relieved. "Am I going to be arrested?" "I don't think so," he replied. "From what I can tell, he broke into your house, assaulted you, and hit your daughter. It looks like you were just defending your family. Unless I hear otherwise, no, I won't be arresting you. But I will be arresting him." I picked up my phone, which had fallen out of my pocket when that jerk hit me. I called my parents, and my dad said he'd come right over. By the time he was on his way, an ambulance had arrived in front of our house, and the paramedics were already inside. They checked on Emma to make sure she was all right, then turned their attention to me before looking at the guy, who was now unconscious on the floor. As they wheeled him out on a stretcher, my dad arrived. "What the hell happened?" he asked as he walked in. "We had an unwanted guest," I explained. He took one look at my face. "Damn, son, that's going to take a while to heal," he remarked. Then, noticing Emma crying on the couch, he went over and held her. "It's okay, honey. The bad man's gone now." He scanned the room. "Where's Timmy?" Timmy was hiding under the table, barely visible under the long tablecloth. We saw him peek out. "It's safe now, buddy," I reassured him. "You can come out." He crawled out from under the table and joined us. My dad turned to the policeman. "Can we leave now?" he asked. The officer nodded. "Yeah, you're free to go. I'll need to talk to your son for a bit, but you don't need to stay," he replied. "Thanks," my dad said. He gathered up the kids and their things before coming back over to me. "Stop by when you're done here. All right?" "I will, Dad. Thanks," I told him. I hugged and kissed the kids goodbye, promising I'd be along soon. Once they left, the officer and I sat on the couch as he took my statement. I couldn't believe how quickly everything had escalated. "Good thing your neighbor called when he did," the officer said. "I was just a few blocks away. I've been keeping an eye on that Lavalier situation. Was that your wife he was seen with?" I nodded. "Yeah," I answered. "Sorry to hear that," he said, handing me a card with a counselor's contact information. "Call if you need someone to talk to." "Thanks, officer. I appreciate it," I replied, shaking his hand before he left. Standing in the living room, I stared at what was left of my front door. Fred, the neighbor who'd called the cops, came over and took a look too. "You all right, Jim?" he asked. "I am now," I said. "Thanks for calling the police." "No problem. I saw him kick that door in, and I just happened to be out front with the lawnmower. What did you do to the guy?" "I knocked him out with a skillet, if you can believe that," I replied. He laughed. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," he said. "But just out of curiosity, why did he kick your door in? Wasn't it unlocked?" "No, it wasn't locked," I said. "And the security screen wasn't either. All he had to do was turn the handle. I guess he was too mad to try." "Well, the door still closes, but the frame's all messed up," he said. "You'll probably need to screw it shut until you can replace it. I'll grab my drill and some screws and give you a hand, if you'd like." "That'd be great, Fred," I said. "Thanks. I'll get my drill too." With Fred's help, we managed to get the door closed, but I had to screw it shut because of the damage the guy did when he kicked it in. Luckily, the deadbolt wasn't locked at the time, so I could still use it. "That should do it," Fred said. "Let me know when you get a replacement and I'll help you put it in." "Thanks again," I said. One more thing messed up by my wife's cheating, I thought. I made 2 quick calls, one to Lisa and the other to Audrey. Lisa wasn't thrilled that I took the guy down with a skillet, but she was glad everything turned out okay, and even happier that I wasn't in jail, and the kids were fine. She did get a laugh out of the fact that Lavalier was in the hospital and would be arrested. Audrey mentioned she'd overheard the call on her police scanner and had already talked to the reporter covering it. "You know I can't keep your name out of this anymore," she said. "It'll all be in the police report." "Yeah, I know," I replied. We chatted a bit more before she advised me to keep an eye on the news. "Everyone's going to be all over this story now," she added. After we hung up, I went upstairs and took another shower. My eye had already started swelling and turning black and blue when I checked in the mirror. I figured I needed to make one more call, so I speed-dialed my boss. I explained everything and told her I'd need a few days to sort it all out. "Damn," she said. "Sounds like you had one hell of a weekend. No worries? You've got enough comp time? Take the week off and handle it, okay?" "Thanks, boss," I said. After the call, I headed out to visit my parents and the kids. Linda arrived at their place just as I pulled up. I wasn't expecting her, and I wasn't sure what was about to happen. We both got out of our cars and walked up to the door at the same time. The moment she saw me, her face dropped in shock. "Oh my God, are you okay?" she asked. I shook my head. "What happened?" "A bit late to care about my well-being, don't you think?" I said sarcastically. "You want to know what happened? Your lover happened. He came to the house looking for a fight. Ended up hitting Emma." "Emma," she gasped. "Is she all right? Did he hurt her?" "Yeah, he did," I replied. "But don't worry, I got back at him with your big skillet." "Did you hurt him?" she asked. "Please tell me you didn't hurt him." I couldn't believe she was asking me that. "He's in the hospital," I said. "I'm not sure what condition he's in, and frankly, I don't care. He's in police custody now, and they're pressing charges. What are you even doing here?" "I came to see the kids," she said. "I miss them. I haven't seen them since, well, you know." "Since the night you left us for him?" I asked. "It's been, what, 36 hours? And now you're thinking about them?" "Please don't call him that," she said. "He ruined our marriage, Linda, and you helped him. You didn't even think twice about me or the kids," I snapped, feeling my anger build. "He wrecked our family. He had the nerve to tell me he was going to keep sleeping with you, even in our house and in our bed. Today he broke in and hit Emma. That makes him a top-class jerk, don't you think? And here you are, defending him." I walked into the house and she followed behind me. All eyes turned toward us as we entered the room. The children clung to their grandmother, who had now assumed her protective Mama Grizzly stance. "What do you want?" she snapped at Linda. "I want to see my children," Linda replied. Timmy, looking frightened, held on to my mother even tighter. Emma glared at her mother with open disdain. "Why did you kiss that man, Mommy?" she asked. "What man?" Linda asked in confusion. "That man," Emma pointed at the television. "The one who hit me." We all turned to look and saw Lavaliere's face on the screen. "Breaking news from Eyewitness News," the anchor began. "Sharks tight end Mark Lavaliere is reportedly facing multiple charges tonight after allegedly breaking into the home of a woman he was seen with last Friday. Police reports indicate that he assaulted the woman's husband and one of her young children. The husband is said to have defended his family using a large cast-iron skillet. Lavaliere is currently being treated at County General Hospital for a severe head injury and other wounds," the anchor continued. "The district attorney has confirmed that charges will be filed, and Lavaliere will be taken into custody once his medical condition stabilizes. The Sharks management has just released a statement announcing his suspension, pending the investigation's outcome." The scene then cut to Roger and Jack standing behind a microphone. "We regret to inform you that our tight end, Mark Lavaliere, is currently hospitalized, recovering from a head wound and other injuries," Jack said. "After reviewing the police report, we extend our apologies to the family he allegedly assaulted. We did reach out to the husband with what we believe was a fair offer, but he declined." "How do you respond to the potential charges?" one reporter asked. "It seems they include making a terroristic threat, breaking and entering assault and battery, and striking a child." "We have no comment at this time," Roger responded. "We have placed Mr. Lavaliere on paid suspension while the investigation is ongoing. He is currently unconscious, so we haven't been able to hear his side of the story. That's all for now." "Thank you." The scene cut back to the studio. "This is a developing story," the anchor said. Stay tuned to Eyewitness News for further updates. When the report ended, everyone turned to look at Linda. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Unconscious?" "What other injuries are they talking about, Jim? What did you do to him?" "Yeah, that's right," I replied. "Worry about your lover, not your daughter who he threw across the room. In case you're curious, I kicked him in the groin. More than once." Linda moved toward Emma, but the little girl backed away. My mother spoke up. "Haven't you done enough damage to these children?" she asked. "To this family?" "I think it's best if you leave now, Linda," my father said, "while you still have the chance." "And Linda," my mother added, "you're never welcome in this house again." Tears filled Linda's eyes as she looked at the kids, my mother, then my father, and finally at me. There was no pity for her in that room. She turned, defeated, and walked toward the door. "It was just one night," she sobbed as she left. After she walked out, I held the kids as they cried on my shoulder. Eventually, they quieted down. I kissed them both good night, and after saying my goodbyes, I left. When I got home, I had to remind myself to enter through the garage because my front door wasn't working. Once inside, my phone buzzed. It was a call from LW, a close family friend who had recently retired after a long career as an attorney. He was one of the sharpest and wisest men I knew, and the best friend a family like ours could ask for. "Hey, LW," I answered. "Hey yourself," the old man said. "I saw the report. I've been following the story and recognized Linda from the photos. How are you and the kids holding up?" "Not great," I replied. "Is it true you took Lavalier down with a skillet?" he asked. "Yeah, it's true," I confirmed. He chuckled. "Good for you," he said. "So you're divorcing Linda then?" "I am," I replied. "Any chance you two can work things out?" he asked. "I hate to see families split up." "No chance, LW," I said, then told him about the videos Lavalier sent and the things he said. "That does complicate things," he acknowledged. "Have you talked to a lawyer yet?" "I've got an appointment with Lisa Hawkins in the morning," I said. "Hawkins, huh?" he asked. "The Ice Queen herself." "Ice Queen?" I questioned. "Yeah, she's known for being cold as ice in the courtroom," he explained. "If you're looking for a scorched earth approach, she's your girl. But she's also one of the most expensive family law attorneys in the state." "Can you afford her?" "She said she'd take my case pro bono," I replied. "Really?" LW sounded surprised. "Do you know why?" "No idea," I said. "Maybe you should ask," he suggested. "I will," I assured him. We talked for a while longer about other things. "If there's anything I can do, let me know," he offered. "Thanks," I said before ending the call. I had some dinner, gathered the documents Lisa said she'd need, then crawled into bed. My sleep was restless. The next morning, after breakfast, I headed out the door. About halfway to Lisa's office, my phone buzzed. It was a call from Linda's mother, so I answered using my Bluetooth headset to avoid talking on the phone while driving. "Jim, you need to get to the hospital," she said urgently. "Why?" I asked. "It's Linda," she explained. "She attempted to kill herself last night. She took an overdose of sleeping pills with some alcohol. They managed to pump her stomach, but she's still not out of danger." "She tried to end her life and messed that up too, huh?" I said coldly. "Sorry, I have an important meeting right now. Maybe I can stop by after my appointment." "Jim, she's still your wife and the mother of your children," she said. "And she's in the hospital. Don't you care at all?" "Why do you think she's there?" I replied. And do you think she thought about the kids when she ran off with that jerk? Or about me? And where was she when that jerk hurt her daughter? I have a meeting with my lawyer. I might stop by after that. Please, Jim, she's a mess, she said. This has shattered her completely. She has no one to blame but herself, I said. How can you be so cold? She asked. Linda loves you and the kids. I'm really feeling the love, let me tell you, I replied. I need to go now. I'll try to visit after my meeting. She gave me the room number and I hung up after saying goodbye. I arrived at the downtown parking structure and then headed to the building where Lisa's office was located. I was greeted by a striking young brunette receptionist who directed me to a seat in the waiting area while she contacted Lisa. Shortly after, a petite blonde in a pantsuit emerged and guided me inside. Once we were in the office, she turned and extended her hand. I'm Lisa Hawkins, she said with a smile. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Jim. Likewise, I replied, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Same here, she said. Let's get down to business, shall we? Did you bring the information I requested? I did, I said, handing over the folder with our financial details and a USB drive containing the videos sent by Ashley. She reviewed the materials briefly, nodding and making notes as she went. So, she began after finishing, here's my plan. We'll file for divorce on the grounds of adultery. In this state, adultery can be used to contest any alimony claims. Plus, it seems that you and your spouse earn nearly the same amount. Typically, the state divides everything equally, but in your case, we might be able to secure a bit more. We'll also seek physical custody, though you should be aware that the court usually awards this to the mother unless there are indications she's unfit. Well, she did attempt suicide last night, I mentioned, and she wasn't present when her lover assaulted my daughter. Her eyes lit up with a smile. Very interesting, she said. One could argue that someone who tries to take their own life might not be mentally stable enough to care for children. And as you mentioned, her lover did attack your daughter. That reminds me, I'll need to file for a restraining order against both her and Lavalier. Even though he's in the hospital and facing charges? I asked. Especially because he's facing charges, she replied. He has already shown a willingness to break in and assault you and the children, which makes him a danger. I believe the court will agree. Just because he's being charged doesn't mean he won't be released on bail or his own recognizance. Do you own a gun, by the way? I shook my head. No, I don't, I said. That's why I use the skillet. She laughed. Noted, she said. Remind me not to upset you, at least not in the kitchen. By the way, where are your children now? They're at my parents' house, I replied. Okay, we'll include them and their house in the restraining order, she said, then took out another set of papers. I've also started working on the lawsuit against Lavalier and his team, she said. Typically, alienation of affection lawsuits don't have a high success rate. However, your case might be stronger due to the videos he sent you and the assault charges related to his attack on you, your home, and your daughter. I did some research and found that he's worth about $125 million. Given what he's done to you and your family, asking for $12.5 million seems reasonable. That doesn't guarantee you'll get that amount, but it's worth trying. Since he's hurt others as well, we might be able to find more victims willing to come forward, potentially turning this into a class action. What do you think? You're the lawyer, I replied. Do what you think is best. All right, she said. It won't be easy, but we can give it a shot. We might also build a similar case against the team, as all players are bound by a morality clause. However, the outcome will depend on their actions after the charges are filed. Be aware, that this won't be a straightforward fight. I figured as much, I said. For what it's worth, the divorce itself might be resolved fairly quickly, she continued. In this state, adultery is considered a misdemeanor, although it's rarely prosecuted. I don't agree with the law, but it's still in place. We can use it to our advantage. If she contests the divorce, we can use the adultery charge as leverage. If she doesn't contest it, the divorce could be finalized in 3 to 6 months. The lawsuits will take more time and effort, but I believe we'll end up better off. Any questions so far? Just one, I said. What's that? She asked. You mentioned you're working on this pro bono, I said. Why are you doing that? You know you're not the only one Lavalier has harmed, right? She replied. I nodded. He seduced my fiancée several years ago before he became the star he is today. Wait, what? I asked. I'm sorry to hear that. Is he bisexual or something? She shook her head. No, not at all, she said. But my fiancée at the time was. I looked puzzled and she noticed. She smiled and explained. We got engaged after the Obergefell decision legalized same-intimacy marriage nationwide in 2015. It was a similar situation to yours. She fell for him instantly, much like your wife did. Things were never the same between us after that. I ended the engagement and, to be honest, I wanted to get some revenge on him, but the chance didn't come until you arrived. Most of his victims usually hide in shame after being betrayed. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Are you and she still on good terms? We're on speaking terms, but I wouldn't call us friends, she replied. We've both moved on. She paused, then asked seriously, Does my lifestyle choice bother you? I shook my head. Not at all, I said, which made her smile. Good, she said. I'm glad to hear that. So, are you and Audrey Tanis, seeing each other? I asked. She laughed and shook her head. We're just good friends, nothing more, she said. And while there's nothing romantic between us, I wouldn't mind spending more time with her. Why? Were you thinking of pursuing her? She likes you, by the way. I've never known her to take a story so personally before. That's the last thing on my mind right now, I said. At the moment, my children are the most important thing in my life. As they should be, she said. They need their father more than ever. Let me get started on this, and I should have the divorce paperwork ready to file in a day or two. If your wife is still in the hospital, we might be able to serve her there. I'd like to be present when she's served, if possible, I said. I think we can arrange that, she said. Standing up to signal the end of the meeting, she added, I'll be in touch. Take care, okay? We shook hands one last time, and I headed to the hospital to check on Linda. I parked the car and went inside. When I reached her room, her mother was speaking with a doctor. I saw Linda hooked up to tubes and a ventilator. She looked very unwell. Oh, good, you're finally here, her mother said. They've put her on Suic D watch and will be running tests. They're worried she might have brain damage since she was unconscious for so long. She nearly died, you know. What happened? I inquired. After she came back from seeing you and the kids, she went upstairs. I heard her crying intensely and went to check on her, she explained. I held her for a long time and she seemed okay, so I gave her a nightcap to help her relax. When I checked on her early this morning, I found an open bottle of sleeping pills next to her empty glass. Her face was blue, and I thought she was already dead. I called 911 and they brought her here. They pumped her stomach and gave her something to counteract the pills, but she's in bad shape. Once the doctor says she's stable, they plan to bring in a counselor to talk to her. They might keep her in the psych ward for a while. I'm not sure. How long will she be here? I asked. "A few days," she replied. I called her work, and they've put her on sick leave. Why? Are you planning to serve her with divorce papers at the hospital? If this is where she is, then yes, I answered. How could you? She asked. That could kill her. She's already devastated enough. Tough luck, I said. She looked at me in shock. Jim Carlyle, how can you be so cold and cruel? She asked. I met her gaze before responding. I can be as cold and cruel as necessary, I said. She knew what she was doing when she left me, but she didn't care. Now she has to face the consequences for what she's done to our family. I looked at Linda, noticing a tear fall down her cheek. I shook my head and left the room. After I got home, I tried to distract myself from thinking about Linda. First on my to-do list was fixing the door, so I went online to check door prices. I realized I'd also need to pay for the jamb. Damn. I took measurements and ordered a new door and door locks online. The site promised next-day delivery, so I visited my neighbor Fred, who agreed to help me hang the door once it arrived. The following days were pretty routine. I woke up, ate, checked the news, and then worked around the house. When the door arrived, Fred and I installed it, and I replaced the locks. I also made sure to spend some time with the kids. My parents kindly took them to and from school and daycare, but I wanted to see them as much as I could. It was tough explaining to them that their mother wouldn't be around as much. Emma was still scared of adults, especially men, so I spent as much time as possible comforting her. Damn Linda for putting us through this, I thought. The day arrived when Linda was to receive divorce papers, so Lisa called me to inform me of the process server's arrival. She advised me to keep silent until the papers were served. I provided her with the room number and left. At the door, I encountered the process server and saw Linda's mother standing there, tears on her face. Please don't do this to her, she pleaded. Not like this. I shook my head and entered the room with the process server. Linda was off the ventilator, lying in bed, with tears streaming down her cheeks. The process server approached her. Linda Carlyle? He asked. Yes, she replied softly. He handed her a manila envelope. You've been served, he said. In addition to the divorce papers, there is a restraining order against you and Mr. Lavaliere. You are required to stay at least 500 feet away from your husband, your children, your husband's residence, and his parents' residence, including his place of employment. Disregarding this order could result in arrest, do you understand? She nodded before turning to me. Can't we get past this? She asked. It was just one night. One night too many, Linda, I responded. Emma is still struggling because of what your lover did to her. It never would have happened if not for your actions. Sign the papers, Linda. But I don't want a divorce, she said. What if I decide to fight this? Then I'll have no choice but to formally charge you with adultery, I said. Adultery? She asked. Yes, I confirmed. My lawyer says adultery is a misdemeanor in this state. No one has been prosecuted for it yet, but there's always a first time. Just sign the papers and be done with it. We're asking for half of what's in the bank, and I'm seeking custody since you seem unable to care for yourself. Once the doctor clears you, you can see the children if they want to see you. Right now, they don't. We're asking for minimal child support, but nothing more. You get your share, I get the house, and my share. Given the circumstances, I believe I'm being more than fair. Can I at least look at them before I sign? She asked. Of course, I replied. She read through the documents, tears streaming down her face. After a few minutes, she sighed and asked for a pen. The process server handed her one and watched as she signed. He signed as a witness and took the documents back. "I'll return these to Miss Hawkins," he said. "Good day." Once he left, Linda looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "Isn't there any way we can get past this?" she pleaded. "I didn't mean to hurt you. It just happened." "Actually, you did intend to hurt me," I said. "You didn't waste any time leaving with Ashley when he picked you up at the club. The moment you saw him, you were his. You didn't even give me a second thought. There's no way I can move past what you did. Ever." She began crying harder. "I'm sorry, Jim," she said. "Can you ever forgive me?" I shook my head. "No," I replied. "I can't forgive you. Not now, at least. Maybe in a few years, but not now. I'll never be able to forget what you did." "I'm so sorry," she cried. Normally, I would have comforted her, but at that moment I felt nothing for her. It was as if she was a stranger on the street, one of thousands I might pass in a day without a second thought. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Me too." I turned and walked out of the room and out of her life. The following months were challenging for all of us. The kids and I had to adjust to life without Linda, establishing a new routine. I picked up the tasks Linda used to handle, mostly through trial and error. Being Mr. Mom was no easy feat, but I managed with some help from my mother. Over time, the kids grew accustomed to their new reality and missed their mother less. Emma benefited greatly from counseling, which made a significant difference. Linda, by the way, attempted SUIC-D twice more and was once again saved by her mother. After the third attempt, she was deemed incompetent and admitted to a state-run long-term mental health facility. I've heard she spends most of her time in a near catatonic state, hardly interacting with anyone. She eats, breathes, uses the bathroom, and sleeps, but not much else. Most of her days are spent alone in her room, rocking back and forth, seemingly lost in thoughts of better times. I've distanced myself from our former circle of friends. Dee lost her composure when served with legal papers. Naturally, I never received any financial compensation from her, though I didn't really expect to. I just wanted her to realize the extent to which her actions, or lack thereof, had devastated 4 lives. A few months after that fateful Friday, I saw Dave, who informed me that he and Dee were divorcing. It seems she had tried the same thing Linda did, while their so-called friends covered for her. "Now I understand what you went through," Dave told me. "I can't express how sorry I am for everything. I didn't receive as much from my lawsuit against the Sharks as I had hoped, but I still secured a substantial amount of money. This was enough to cover both kids' college tuition and leave a significant amount remaining. Additionally, I managed to get lifetime season tickets. They ended up firing Lavaliere, but only after he was on his way to prison to serve an 8 to 15-year sentence for his convictions on all counts. By the way, we actually filed 2 lawsuits against the Ashla. Over 50 men came forward, claiming that their marriages were ruined by Lavaliere. Lisa organized the class action lawsuit and presented it to the court. Several months later, the judge allowed it to proceed, and the legal battles began. Lisa assured me that regardless of the outcome, win, lose, or draw, the Ashel would end up broke. I also had a separate lawsuit against him for intentional infliction of emotional distress and damages resulting from his attack on me, my home, and my daughter. We won that case, receiving a substantial $1.5 million award from the jury. It wasn't as much as we initially sought, but winning was satisfying. Even though Lisa didn't request anything, I gave her a percentage for all her hard work. In July, I decided to sell the house because it held too many painful memories. I found a nice 3-bedroom condo nearby with security features, so I bought it and we moved in. With the help of a counselor, I was gradually rebuilding my life, though my social life was still limited due to the time I spent with the kids, who remained my top priority. Audrey introduced me to April, a friend who had gone through a divorce, and we dated intermittently for a few months. She was pleasant and we got along well, but I remained hesitant due to past experiences with Linda. In December, Linda's doctor suggested bringing the children to visit her on Christmas. He thought the visit might help lift Linda out of her persistent depression. Until then, they had said she wasn't ready to see them. I discussed it with her mother and asked the children if they wanted to see their mother for Christmas. To my surprise, they both did, so on the day before Christmas Eve, I took them to the facility located in a beautifully maintained area on the edge of town. Initially, the children hesitated to approach her. I couldn't blame them. She appeared worn out and completely shattered. The light had faded from her eyes and she seemed lost in distant thoughts. However, she brightened up when the children came over and gave me a faint smile. "Thank you for bringing them," she said softly. I nodded in response, choosing to remain silent. By that point, most of the anger I had harbored toward her had given way to sadness. The doctor and I observed as they updated her on recent events. After about an hour, the doctor asked if I wanted to take the kids back. I watched for a moment and then shook my head. "Let her have this," I said. "It's Christmas after all." He smiled and nodded. We continued to watch as they talked and laughed together. The doctor turned to me while Linda and the kids spent time together. "I'm curious, Mr. Carlyle," he said. "What happened?" "I know her version and what's been reported, but I haven't heard your side of the story. Could you share it with me? It might give me better insight into her perspective." I recounted the events and my feelings. Hopefully, that would clarify some things. When I finished, he regarded me thoughtfully. "Have you considered reconciling?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not going to happen," I replied. "She made a mistake, true, but is there any way you could move past it?" he asked. "No, Doc," I said. "Leaving the creamer out all night is a mistake. I've done that. What she did was deliberate and calculated. She conspired with her friends to make it happen. It's time for her to own up to her actions and move forward. Maybe you could help her with that." "All she wants is her family's love," he said. "Well, wanting and reality are different," I said. "You can want something all you want, but that doesn't make it happen." "You seem to be holding on to some anger," he observed. "How would you feel if you were in my position, Doc?" I asked. "Wouldn't you be a little upset if your wife just turned her back and walked away without even saying goodbye?" "I understand your perspective," he admitted. "How long do you think she'll stay here?" I inquired. "It's difficult to say," he replied. "Now that she's a ward of the state, she has to prove she can live independently without posing a risk to herself or others. She's quite far from that right now, so she could be here for years." I nodded, acknowledging his point. We watched her interact with the children in silence until I noticed that Linda was beginning to tire. "She gets tired much more quickly these days," the doctor noted as he approached her. "Linda, it's time for your medication now. The children need to head home." She nodded, gave the kids one last kiss, and looked at me with sadness in her eyes. "Thank you so much, Jim," she said. "I'd love to see them a bit more often. I'm doing better, really." "Yes, Linda, I can see that," I replied. "You look really good," she said. "Are you seeing anyone?" "I date occasionally, but nothing serious," I answered. "I miss you, and I still love you," she said. I nodded in response. "I miss the woman I married," I said. "Get better, okay? And Merry Christmas." She smiled, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the old Linda. "Merry Christmas," she said. "And thanks again." "You're welcome," I said. The children said their goodbyes and came over to me. "Can we visit her next week, Dad?" Emma asked. "Please?" "Yeah, can we, Dad?" Little Timmy added. "Well, I suppose we can arrange something," I said. "Let's get you guys home now." And thus began our twice-monthly visits. Usually Linda's mother would take the kids, but occasionally I would. I even had a few conversations with her, but we never talked about the Ashel. There was no chance of reconciling, and she knew it. But she seemed to appreciate the brief moments we spent together. A year and a few days after that Friday when our lives were turned upside down, the first virus death was reported in the United States on February 29th. Didn't I predict that February would have to get better to be worse? The following month, lockdowns and stay-at-home orders were implemented. Oh, it was bad. In a few months, it will be 2 years since Linda left her family with the Ashel. While things are still challenging, they're nowhere near as dire as they once were. For instance, in June 2020, Lavaliere's team threw in the towel and settled the class action. Lisa was right. By the end, the Ashel was broke. We didn't get much, but it was nice to know that he was finished forever. He lost everything: his money, his reputation as a public hero, his fame. Even Linda found it funny. Maybe next February won't be as bad, or at least not as terrible as the last two.